I'm one who commands, ruling all provinces in my empire. Build aqueducts and say my name's Augustus. It's the Pax Romana.
Now, walk into the forum through the arch made of marble rock. Grand Uncle Caesar joined up with Cleopatra. If he hadn't died on the Ides, he'd see me and he'd say, man, that's how I beat Pompey. Armies are obeying me, goods are moving really free, government's efficient, and there's Pax, Latin word for peace. No more of these Punic wars fighting over Sicily. Hannibal across the Alps, still Carthage couldn't beat. And Hannibal had elephants. We were a republic, a government run by elected ones who we call representatives. The branch is called the Senate, is controlled by nobles called patricians, but the poor were citizens and workers were called plebeians who chose the citizens assembled. My name's on the calendar. My name's on the calendar. No, for real, look at August. My name's on the calendar. We got concrete to build arch bridges. We got bats where you read and talk.
What's up, guys?
Build the Coliseum. Fill the Coliseum. Get some gladiators. Let the lions eat them. You know, the Roman Empire's growing. Got to keep the conquered people from revolting. All of them should know the laws. Plebeians and slaves will see them in the forum and say, they're the 12 tables.
I'm one who commands, ruling all provinces in my empire. Build aqueducts and say my name's Augustus. It's the Pax Romana. I'm one who commands, ruling all provinces in my empire. Build aqueducts and say my name's Augustus. It's the Pax Romana.
7 hills help protect us from invasion. Fertile farmlands in the plains of Latium. Volcanoes, they sometimes erupt, like Mount Vesuvius. Pompeii was sad, but their soil's rich. The Italian peninsula's on Mediterranean trade routes. You'll see that it's shaped like a boot. My non-citizen soldiers still defend us. Every 5 years we count the people with the census. Servants, your slaves, your brothers, your babies. We're gonna take a census, so get ready, cause we're counting up the numbers. We do it every 5 years, counting up the numbers. So register, because we're counting up the numbers. People are like, oh, you're adopted by Caesar. I'm like, careful, you're talking to an emperor. Caesar was no emperor, he got murdered by senators. At most he was a dictator with only a dictatorship. He gave land to his soldiers to appease them. He had to hand free grain to his citizens. Yeah, he governed Gaul. He crossed the Rubicon to start a civil war, but I've defeated generals. Why'd he make citizens of those not born in Rome? Maybe he was scared there'd be a plebeian revolt. Plebeian revolt. Hey, Caesar, were you reading Livy's books too much?
I'm one who commands, ruling all provinces in my empire. Build aqueducts and say my name's Augustus. It's the Pax Romana. I wear a laurel and robe. It's called the toga, though. I build those Roman roads, and your taxes pay for those. Bad news for you consuls, who made new laws for Rome. All those I can veto, the Republic stays our throne. I'm one who commands, ruling all provinces in my empire. Build aqueducts and say my name's Augustus. It's the Pax Romana.
Is that a bed sheet you're wearing?
Alright, hey guys. Sorry we're running a little bit late. We'll go ahead and get started. This is the Ides of October scope with Lewis, my brother, and I'm Yvonne. And we have a good one for you tonight. Do all roads lead to Rome? We're going to be talking about Mueller, Epstein, Asimov, and Minsky. And hey, I put a link for the
song you just heard.
Yeah, go and listen to that, and you might even need to listen to it a few times because it's
a nice summary. It puts the lyrics up for you and you see what he's talking about because some of it's kind of quick.
So true. Right. Everything in it's so true. It's entertaining too. So watch that.
Kind of translate to today as well.
So anyway, we had listed four names: Mueller, Epstein, Asimov, and Minsky. And The first one we're going to talk about is Asimov. Isaac Asimov was a prolific sci-fi writer back in the 60s, 70s.
60s, 70s, 80s, probably the #1 guy.
Yeah, he was big. And he had a son named David. And David was a pedophile, even though he never served time for it.
Right.
Anyway, so back in the late 90s, 1998, David Asimov.
His house is raided.
House was raided, and they found the biggest child porn stash. They didn't just find child porn.
It was animals. It was everything.
But it was also like a production center,
Yeah.
distribution center. It was like a studio where they produced it. He had all kinds of high-tech,
He could duplicate tapes. He had a sophisticated scanner because they found, I think it was like 4,500 tapes and CDs and images. They said they didn't have the manpower to go through it all.
Right.
And this sophisticated scanner that he could duplicate stuff, so they figured that this was a distribution node for child pornography mainly, but bestiality, all kinds of just horrible stuff.
Right, but it was huge. And the reason the authorities were tipped off by to come there and make the raid is because he had his printer, his color printer and scanner had broken, and he took it to a computer store. And the computer store found some images on there with children in pictures of sex with adults. And so they called the authorities in. They raided, and Milo Yiannopoulos did an article on it. And one of the quotes from one of the police officers that
Detectives
raided
on it, yeah.
said, "There aren't enough man hours." Like there was it took them 2 days to document everything. It took them 2 whole days to document everything that was there. That's how big it was.
And it doesn't mean that in that 2 days, they couldn't watch it all.
Right.
They couldn't see it all.
And another thing about this David Asimov, when you start researching him, you can't find him. There's no pictures of him anywhere.
All I know, he's been living in Florida for like the last 10 years.
And, I saw somewhere the last time that we talked about this where he had said that, but I couldn't find that for this.
And you can't find any
I knew
images.
I'd read
You
that
can't find any
before.
photos. Like he's been scrubbed.
But there's no photos except for when he was a child, and pictures of him when he's like 9 years old, and maybe one where he's even younger. No picture. So here's a description of. He's a short, chubby man with a thick mustache. That's it. Short, chubby man with a thick mustache. But to give you an idea of how big this bus was, so that he had anything imaginable regarding sex between human beings and human beings and animals was there. Whatever your imagination can conjure up, he had it. It was like walking into a TV studio. He had like 4,000 video cassettes. Approximately 1,000 of those contained child pornography. Video cameras, several VCRs, and a costly tabletop scanner to create computer images. And then he had editing and mass production capabilities.
They said it was like walking into a TV studio.
Yeah. So he was charged with 4 counts of child porn, but he was also charged with distributing child porn, which is a much more serious felony. So they go to court. They're going to a preliminary hearing, which at the preliminary hearing, you're going to present all the evidence. So there was going to be a lot of evidence that the public would have heard about. So unexpectedly, and to everyone's surprise, the U.S. Attorney's office, or the prosecutor, said
The local prosecutor deferred.
He deferred
backed out.
to the U.S. Attorney, who at the time in California was Robert Mueller.
And appointed to that post by Bill Clinton
Yeah.
just months before. I mean,
Yeah.
just in time for it.
Yeah, it was
He was already arrested, I believe.
Well, I couldn't find the exact dates that Robert Mueller was appointed, but it was 1998. So, did they appoint him specifically for this to because they were like, oh my gosh, we need a fixer. I don't know, but he was appointed in 1998. The raid was made in 1998, and Mueller takes over. And the only reason that the locals. The reasons that they claimed that they gave it up was that it was such a huge endeavor that they didn't have the resources and to do it thoroughly, and they were going to let the feds come in and do a more thorough job. That didn't happen.
So Mueller swoops in with his plea deal.
Yeah, so Mueller swoops in with his plea deal, and so the judge, the local prosecutor.
Oh yeah, before Mueller, they get him because he wants to get out of his own recognizance, saying he could not post bail. He didn't have the money to post bail. So that judge said, I can't remember his name, but he says, since we can't identify any local victims, we're going to go ahead and let him out on his own recognizance.
Right. What that meant by there are no local victims, that was kind of weird. So it matters if they're local victims, if they're not close by, we can let them out. That didn't make sense. So anyway, so when they turned this over to the U.S. attorney, they rescinded their 4 felony charges with the idea that if the feds didn't do anything, that they would reinstate that within 30 days.
Yeah, the charges dismissed by the judge with conditions.
Yeah.
And those are the conditions. And then they come back.
So then they come back and, they charge him with 4 counts of possession. So they charge him with 4 counts of possession. And, so they don't, the distribution charges are gone, so it's just light. And actually, if you read about the back and forth between his attorneys and Mueller, they're not happy with they don't want to plead to the 4 charges. So Mueller reduces it to 2. Somebody else, this is very similar to how Jeffrey Epstein's went down, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So it gets reduced to 2 counts of possession, and where he could have, so the 4 charges that were felonies, distribution would have carried like 5 years apiece. And even with the ones that he was charged with, ended up being charged, I think he could have been charged with 5 years apiece. All he got was 6 months probation. He didn't have to register as a sex offender.
An ankle bracelet.
Yeah, for 6 months. For 6 months. The AP. So a lot of people. I'm getting ahead of myself. So what happened with the Asimov thing is very similar to what happened with the Jeffrey Epstein prosecution. And Mueller was FBI director. Okay, so that's another thing. This guy, Asimov, was convicted in March, the end of March.
2001.
No, yeah, 2001. And then a few months later, Mueller was nominated to be the FBI director by then Bush.
Mm-hmm.
So he does this, he gets his plea deal, he does what he was supposed to do, he fixes this case so that it doesn't explode or expose any other. That's the thing with both Epstein and this Asimov thing. As big as this bust was, if the information had come to light, it would have exposed a lot of people. That's why they called Mueller in. That's why they needed him to fix this. So, was the FBI, him being appointed FBI director, was that a, here's your reward for doing what we wanted you to do? And so he was nominated in July of 2001.
Because he had always been an attorney, just an attorney. He was in the military, but he was an attorney. So no law enforcement background whatsoever. That a few months after that conviction
Right.
of Asimov, he's FBI director.
Right. And he was confirmed 1 week before 9/11. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
How convenient.
And all the stuff that happened after 9/11 with the FBI.
Well, he
the
would
White House.
have been in charge largely over, I think, the 9/11 Commission.
Or he was in the investigation afterwards, which, we find out who committed 9/11 within hours.
Right.
It's because the FBI was already, on top of that, supposedly, but they let it happen.
Right. And then, so, the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing happens on Mueller's watch. And a lot of people say, well...
when people try to obfuscate, just say, Mueller had nothing to do with it, but yeah, he did. We know the FBI does prosecute, but the FBI signed off and basically said, yeah, we're cool with you deferring all this stuff and letting, because Epstein ended up getting state charges, not federal charges for what he did in Florida. But it was Florida, his islands, New Mexico, New York.
Right.
And, we can go into a long story again about the rehash when he was rearrested and stuff.
Right.
But Epstein never had to register as a sex offender in New Mexico for some reason, where, he has a ranch in New Mexico.
He didn't have to register as a sex offender anywhere. As a matter of fact.
I thought it was Florida, but maybe not.
I don't think that he did. I guess we could check that and see
I think he did in Florida, but he didn't have to in New Mexico, and some of the incidences happened there.
Right.
Which go to, he probably didn't have to register because they didn't include all those charges of all the other stuff happened in New York, especially.
Right. And it was Cyrus Vance up in New York. It was someone from his office that had lobbied. He had lobbied him to be the lowest offender. They wanted him to be the highest offender status, and they lobbied for him to be the lowest offender.
For some reason with Epstein, it seems like if this happened with Robert Mueller, he was U.S. Attorney in the Northern District of California back in 98, is that our prosecutors are the ones that they flipped and became the defense attorneys or something.
Right.
Because they were trying to work with the defense attorneys to make it least onerous as possible to Epstein and to Asimov back in 98.
Right. And the AP, they did, so a lot of people say when this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing came back up and he was rearrested and it came back in to the public's view, they started talking about, well, who gave him that sweet plea deal? And Alexander Acosta, who was Trump's.
And of course, he's got his signatures on the deal.
Right.
He came in late because the deal was already worked out.
Right.
Now, I'm no fan of Acosta.
Me either.
Because he, if he was a man of integrity,
seems like he could have done more.
He would have been like, well, if he had seen the whole trove of evidence and the victims and the emails between U.S. attorneys and the defense team hiding the plea deal from the victims, so that they wouldn't even know that it was happening, because they're supposed to be able to face him to fight this if they want. The victims should be agreeing to part of the agreement to these plea deals.
Right.
And of course, when the plea deal happens, the victims are labeled as prostitutes instead of
what a slap
underage.
What a slap in the face.
Underage women who were basically raped by a whole lot of powerful men.
They were raped by Jeffrey Epstein and his cabal of jackies, and then they were raped again by the American government. It's just wrong. But so there's a lot of talk about who's to blame for his sweet plea deal, and everybody. And the only reason that the mainstream media started even talking about it again was because of Alexander Acosta's appointed
him. If Trump had not appointed him to the Labor Department, they would never would have talked about it. But they tried to use it as a cudgel against
They thought it would hurt Trump.
When Trump's not involved with it.
Right.
But Acosta, like I said, I'm no fan of his, because if he had seen all this stuff that we're seeing now, I'm sure he saw even more than we were even aware of now ourselves. A man of integrity and a man who has daughters, and he'd be like, he'd be outraged.
Right.
I can't sign this.
And so the AP did a fact check when everybody's talking about this. They did this over the summer, where they say Mueller didn't strike plea deal with Jeffrey Epstein. So the claim is the FBI under Robert Mueller let billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein off with a weak plea deal after dozens of young girls accused him of sexual assault. AP's assessment, false. Former Miami U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, not the FBI or Mueller, signed a 2008 non-prosecution with Epstein.
This is true. That is fact.
True.
But Acosta came in as U.S. Attorney. He was an The FBI and U.S. attorneys in Florida all agreed to this. But he would only be prosecuted on state charges. So he didn't get any federal stuff. He didn't get any crossing the line stuff because he flew these girls to Ireland. He flew them to New York. He flew them to New Mexico.
And this is a lot of going on because Mueller was the director of FBI. He wasn't the person that was going to indict or prosecute. So, yeah, technically what they're saying is right, but Mueller said, seemed to forget Alexander Acosta in a great stuff. Thanks. Anyways, what was I saying? I lost my train of thought.
Just about, we were talking about.
So Alexander Acosta gave a press conference a few months ago where he stated that he was told that Jeffrey Epstein was intel and to intelligence, so leave it alone.
Off.
So
leave him alone.
So did Mueller tell him that?
But nobody digs into that. Nobody even went. Nobody even dug into it to prove it false.
Right. And another thing with Alexander Acosta and Mueller, not Alexander Acosta, but Mueller, in the David Asimov thing, there was 4 counts. They reduced it to 2, and then they reduced it to the most
the 2
minor
lesser counts.
So here in the Jeffrey Epstein, you had like 40 girls that had charges. So what they did is they picked the 2 oldest so they could make it a prostitution. It's just kind of, it's eerily similar with the 2 charges and the most minor that you could come up with. So that's AP doing their best,
doing journalism.
their fact checks. Yeah, technically that's true, but he was in charge.
Mueller and all those guys, they had worked out that agreement.
Somebody told Mueller, not Mueller. Somebody told
Acosta,
Alexander Acosta that
you need to sign this deal.
he was intel and to leave it alone. Who told him that? And whose intel is it? Why is nobody asking that? So back to Isaac Asimov is David Asimov's dad. And another thing about David Asimov. So David Asimov is not. They didn't have the sex offender registry back then.
No.
He's not on any sex offender registry. Not only was he possessing child porn, he was distributing and producing child porn, and yet he was 46 back then when he was convicted. And where is he now? He's like 66.
Supposedly in Florida. The last few
so
years,
he's
but
in
you
Florida.
Can't find anything.
You think he just stopped doing that? I mean, he was a full blown. So it's kind of scary to think
I've seen articles where they wrote about, the San Francisco Chronicle wrote articles when this happened, and some people try to paint him as, he was just this hermit. He's not. He's harmless.
He just kept to himself.
He's very awkward socially. He's not luring kids into his house. But here's the thing: there's 4,500. It's not images.
Right.
The images are the count on that is much higher. It's 4,500 tapes. At the time, this would have been VHS tapes and CDs, because CDs were starting to come out, strong then. So he was distributing this stuff because this setup was not for somebody who just liked to watch some sick crap. He was distributing this stuff, and he helps further the market for kids getting victimized.
Right.
How many of them, and how many of these kids are foster kids, and
And who are these people like this judge that decides, okay, well, I'm going to let him out of I'm gonna let him out on bail.
And that was 3 days.
$250,000 bail back in 19. I mean, that was a lot of money back in 1998. And they let him out because they didn't see any local children that were on any of the videos. And how would they know that?
Yeah.
How
And
would
the
they
one
know
thing
that?
they used too was that at the time, actual possession of child porn was a misdemeanor,
Right.
but it wasn't just possession of child porn, which I still can't believe that possession of child porn is
Yeah,
like
such
getting
a small,
it's like
you
getting
know,
a speeding ticket. But it wasn't just possession; it was just distribution. It was obvious. You don't have. I think it was 13 recorders
Yeah.
and a
It was
high-tech
14.
scanner
It
where you
was
could do
14.
stuff really quick and
Right.
transfer it and ship it out. I'm like, that's not just
It
mere
was huge.
possession. They stayed away from the crossing state line stuff.
And the thing about it is, it was local authorities that had busted him because they were called by the computer guy. So somehow, the authorities or the feds catch wind of what's going on. I mean, why do y'all think that the U.S. attorney came in and got involved over this David Asimov?
And they couldn't, and the state authorities couldn't, they didn't have the resources to deal with it properly. All these images. The feds come in, everybody thinks, oh, the feds are here, you're done now. No, the charges actually get reduced.
Yeah.
And the plea bargain comes in.
that
And the same
reminds
thing
me.
with Epstein.
That reminds me, like with in the Jeffrey Epstein case, the Palm Beach Police Department did an excellent investigation. Like that's how we know most of what we know is the deposition from those times and the investigation that they did. They took videotape when they went in.
Yeah.
That's how we saw in Jeffrey Epstein's the island where he had like the dental chair, like all the weird.
Yeah.
We know all that from the Palm Beach Police Department investigation. And you think about the feds when they were going after General Flynn, and like they don't hoard. There's no recording of anything. I think feds involved for reasons that we don't. It's not. They're there to cover up. They're not there to investigate. I think these police department they would have been completely capable of handling it because Palm Beach, they were upset.
Well, and especially in '98, even San Francisco, they had the resources to deal with this. San Francisco,
right?
Especially San Francisco '98,
right?
They weren't as fallen as they are now. They
oh yeah,
they would have had.
They were probably in their prime. So anyway, so going back to David Asimov, and his dad was Isaac Asimov, the sci-fi writer. So let me just read you this quote. So,
got a few quotes from Isaac.
yeah. So people who think they know everything are a great annoyance to those of us who do. So he's one of those kind of people that thinks himself God. He thinks himself smarter than everybody.
He's an atheist.
He's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. He's actually very anti-religion. And another one is, speaking of, I got some of my information from this guy named Jamie Deluxe on YouTube.
Yes.
I don't know a lot about him, but his videos he talks about something, but he doesn't talk about it without proof. And he shows this clip at the end of he titled it "Son of Asimov." I encourage you to go and watch it. But at the end of it, he shows a clip of Isaac Asimov saying, "What we need is some sort of federal world government, and the only problem is how we manage to do that." And the third quote was, he described Carl Sagan as one of two people he ever met whose intellect surpassed his own. And that was Carl Sagan. So the second person who surpassed his intellect was Marvin Minsky, who's the second
now
person.
we get into MIT.
Second person on our list. So Marvin Minsky was a professor and scientist of MIT Media Labs, and you'll know him, or you've probably heard him mentioned because of the Jeffrey Epstein, who his money is going to, and
Yeah.
his money. He gave a lot of money to MIT labs, and when Jeffrey Epstein, when they arrested him, and then when he killed himself, the spotlight started shining on the people he was involved in and been connected with. And so Joy Ito, who is, I think he's the current, or he was the current director of MIT Media Labs, he came out and tried to minimize it, saying, "Oh yeah,
It was only $500,000,
$800,000." It turned out somebody leaked internal emails to show it was more like $8 million. And
millions going back years. This is
Yeah.
where he also engages Bill Gates of Microsoft.
oh yeah,
And, you know, there's a lot of people that joined Epstein's sphere after he served time for his shenanigans in Florida.
Right.
So these guys come years later and they still, and like Prince Andrew, royalty in England, he increases his contact with Epstein. A lot of these people do.
Right.
Remember there's the dinner,
yeah.
the celebratory dinner at Epstein's place in
Oh
Florida.
yeah, it's when he
And
gets out. It was like a few months after he got out.
You've got George Stephanopoulos and
Chelsea Handler, Katie Couric,
Katie Couric, and all these people are at his house having a dinner with him, celebrating his
and actually
getting released.
Stephanopoulos came out and said, "Well, he didn't know. He didn't know." Okay,
Mi-
right? Yeah, he didn't know.
Mr. who's been in politics since he worked
Yeah,
with Clinton.
he didn't know. He doesn't know nothing. No. So Joy Ito is discovered in emails talking about this, and somebody leaked the fact that actually they knew a whole lot about Jeffrey Epstein. As a matter of fact, they had a manner of, they called him Voldemort, he who shall not be named,
Yeah.
so that whenever Epstein gave money to them, you were not to list his name.
It was be anonymous, or they actually had, you know, MIT had a thing in place. It was like, you can't accept money from this name.
Right. Right.
That was a policy.
But they did it. They worked around it.
And they had the leaked emails talked about, they were back and forth. Hey, I know you can't put your name on this,
Right.
but we'll do it this way.
Right. And Epstein knew.
Yeah.
Epstein knew, like, they couldn't use his name. Knowledge of Epstein's alleged role was usually kept within a tight circle. And Joy Ito, who was busted in these emails, said, "I did not realize that this would be sent to dozens of people." Adding that Epstein is not named, questions could be asked, but I feel uncomfortable that this was distributed so widely. He wrote that future filings related to Epstein should be submitted only if there is a way to do it quietly. An agent for Gates for Bill Gates, wrote to the leadership of the Media Lab, stating that Gates also wished to keep his name out of any public discussion of the donation. So Bill Gates has largely been left alone, and nobody seems to be going and asking him, hey, he claims that he didn't know anything about it, but obviously he knew enough to keep his name off of any connection.
And just think about what Yvonne and I are able to find. We both work full-time jobs.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with journalism. We're able to find this information. And think about what the media does not report. I've been saying for the last year or so, the biggest tool that mainstream media has for, keeping us in the dark is omission.
Right.
The stuff they don't report on, that they choose not to cover.
This is Sherlock Holmes, the dog that didn't bark. You
Yeah.
know, that's what you should be paying attention to. So Marvin Minsky, who Isaac Asimov thought was smarter than he was, he was named in the reason his name is even thrown around is because when there was some files unsealed that had to do with Epstein, Virginia Giuffre, I think that's how you say her name, she was one of the victims who filed a lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell was Jeffrey Epstein's procurer of young girls, and she in the 2008 trial, Virginia Giuffre named names. She named who Jeffrey Epstein arranged for her to have sex with. So like Prince Andrew, John Brockman of The Edge.
Yeah.
And Marvin.
Former senator.
Bill Mitchell.
Yeah. Bill
Wait,
Mitchell.
I'm not.
He was
George Mitchell, senator, and Bill Richardson,
Bill
Arizona
governor.
New Mexico governor.
New Mexico governor, and he was also in the Clinton administration.
And Marvin Minsky. She mentioned Marvin Minsky. And Marvin Minsky was alive at the time and said that it wasn't true, but, you know.
But the headline is the most the headline to this story is the most horrible thing.
Yeah. I mean, MIT scientist says Epstein, victim Virginia
So
Dupre,
he's not even denying
was entirely willing.
that he had sex with
So
this young woman.
So after Epstein died, and all this is blowing up, and MIT Media Labs is under fire, Harvard is under fire because they were receiving a lot of money from Jeffrey Epstein. So then there was some other internal emails released, and there's I forget his name. What's his name? Richard Stallman, who was with MIT Labs and also Free Software Foundation, was caught in emails defending Marvin Minsky, and he said the word assaulting presumes that he applied force or violence in some unspecified way, but the article itself says no such thing, only that they had sex with underage girls. Yeah. So the most plausible scenario is that she presented herself to him as entirely willing. So this set up a firestorm in people that were in the email going, outraged that he would insinuate, that he's blaming the victim. They asked for it, that they're not victims is basically what he's saying. So then there was a lot more scrutiny placed on that dude. He ended up resigning out of pressure, saying it was due to misunderstandings and mischaracterizations. But when they looked more and more into him, they found out that he was a pedophilia apologist. He wants to legalize pedophilia. And the Daily Beast did an article in 2003, actually, where they quote him as saying, "I think that everyone age 14 or above ought to take part in sex, though not indiscriminately. Some people are ready earlier." So here you have a professor at MIT Labs that's talking about kids having sex with adults. He says, "I'm skeptical of the claim that voluntarily that pedophilia harms children. The argument that it causes harm seems to be based on cases which aren't voluntary, which are then stretched by parents who are horrified by that idea that their little baby is mature."
Here's the thing.
Listen to that.
It's based on cases that aren't voluntary.
The idea that their little baby is maturing.
Yeah.
Your little baby's having sex with adults?
Yeah.
That's maturing? So anyway, that's MIT Labs. That's Marvin Minsky. That's Marvin Minsky, and here's a picture of him. He's exactly what you'd think of when someone who wants
when you
to
think of a pedophile,
legalize
somebody who wants to normalize it.
pedophilia.
Because LGBTQ is trying to add P
Yeah.
to that. That's going to be a crowded sedan.
All right. So anyway, that is Marvin Minsky. That was his defender. If that's your defenders, maybe you've got some problems. So, and also with Marvin Minsky died in 2016. He was 88. Marvin Minsky said he didn't know anything, nefarious with Jeffrey Epstein, which just when you read about Jeffrey Epstein,
When you see his background.
he flaunted, like the girls were always around. Like people talk about how awkward and weird it was. Well, Marvin Minsky held a conference. He hosted it down there on his island in 2002. It was for 2 days on Pedo Island. It was a 2-day symposium on artificial intelligence. And then in 2011, so in 2011 he would have been like 81 or 82. He held another a conference down there on Pedophile Island to discuss the greatest threats to the earth. And he was talking about threats like overpopulation, warfare, asteroids, supervolcanoes, earthquakes, rogue self-replicating nano machines that they create.
I'm surprised he didn't just say humans.
Yeah. So for anyone to say that Marvin Minsky didn't know who Jeffrey Epstein was, Jeffrey Epstein even spoke glowingly of him.
They were birds of a feather.
Yeah. So as a side note, and just as a humorous interval to this. So Marvin Minsky created, and he was a co-founder of MIT Media Labs in the 50s, along with this dude named John McCarthy. And John McCarthy had 3 wives, and his second wife, Vera Watson, in the 70s, so this is like 1978, she was part of a group that the Bay Area, they sent 2 women on the first climb to the top of the world. And they went to, it was one of the mountains, Mount Everest. What was it, Annapurna. So they had a group of like 10 women who were going to go on this, all women, all female
Because men are
trek.
useless.
Yeah. 2 members of the team, including Vera Watson, Beardsley's co-worker. She was the person that was leading this trek at IBM San Jose lab. Anyway, so Beardsley, who had this great idea to have this all-female trek to the top of the world,
Well,
said,
they pick a mountain that's not one of the highest.
yeah,
Which when you're going to Nepal and you're in that Himalayan range,
right.
and so even if it's like the 10th highest or 8th
Yeah.
highest, it's still a very treacherous place. It's not like
Yeah, one of the guys that was head of the Stanford Alpine Club, Nick Clinch, who was president of it, was taken aback. He said, "Are you out of your mind?" And so she thought it was only the 10th highest, so that it wouldn't be as hard as the other ones. What she didn't know was that because the mountain had been climbed so few times at that point, that it would earn a reputation as the most treacherous, with the highest fatality rate of all because of its avalanches. And their idea on going on this trek was like, okay, it was a chance for us to all go on a trip where we didn't have to answer to men who didn't really want you there. Until we got to the mountain, we were just having a wonderful time without a man telling us what to do. Well, on October 15th, the Ides of October, 2 of the women reach the summit. And so this Vera Watson, she's further down, and they're continuing on, but that wouldn't happen because they fell. Her and another girl fell, and actually we don't know which one. They were like tied together or whatever. We don't know which one of them fell, but whoever fell brought the other one down with her. Disappeared while
And they
climbing.
found
Their
them a
bodies
couple
were
of days.
found at the bottom of a 2,000-foot drop, still roped together. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. They died because of feminism. But anyway, John McCarthy, though, the other founder of the MIT Media Labs, he was an atheist, and he was raised as a communist. I know, he was raised as a communist, and he became a conservative Republican after a 2-day visit to Czechoslovakia in 1968 after a Soviet invasion. That's the other co-founder of MIT Media Labs. That's what it is. Anyway, I just think that was hilarious. If you go and read the article, there's a whole bunch of other tidbits on the all-female trek. And actually, it wasn't all-female, because if you get into it, there was like 3 Sherpas, like local. And she comments about the Sherpas. They're like, I don't know, are they shepherds or...
well, they're the ones that guide people up the mountains. They know
Oh, okay.
they know
So
the
they
paths.
go. That's
they know
for
the way
men.
to
That's
go.
for men or women. Anyway,
Those are men. Those are
no, I mean,
Nepalese.
but they would be guiding the men
Yeah,
or women.
yeah.
And she said when they first came upon them that they looked at these women like
Are you crazy?
It was funny. So anyway, that was Marvin Minsky is heavily involved in the Epstein saga. Epstein spoke glowingly of him. Isaac Asimov, father of notorious pedophile David Asimov, thought the world of Marvin Minsky, thought him smarter than himself. So that's kind of wraps up everything that we have on, the Mueller, Epstein, Asimov, and Minsky. But we're going to wrap this up. All roads lead to Rome. I don't know if you saw the story recently about the Vatican being raided. It was
the Secretariat of State was raided, and bear in mind this is Vatican prosecutors. This is Vatican approved.
Right.
But they think it's something to do with a lot of real estate, land, and going back, the Catholic Church has for centuries had lots of control over land and resources and monies and stuff, and so there's something going on there. This happened about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
The articles you'll see will paint it in a good light as like this new Pope is cleaning up the Catholic Church, but
I don't know
when we first, Yvonne and I first started talking about roads leading to Rome, we were kind of mentioning it in with it all leads to pedophilia.
Yeah.
And then you think about the Catholic Church and their problems with this and the priests and stuff, and it's rampant.
Right.
And the Catholics, a lot of people, did Rome really fall?
Right.
And if it did, some people try to correlate the U.S., the United States of America. We're an empire, and we're fall on the same lines. You got immigration problems, and you got pornography and just
All kinds of
decadence and everything and falling. And when Rome actually so-called was sacked by the Goths in 449 A.D. or something like that, there was already a Roman capital in Constantinople.
Right.
And now everybody's eyes are focused on Turkey and the Kurds and all this, and there's a lot of disinformation with that.
Yeah.
And you can go to Jack Kosovic and some other people to check out what's really happening with so-called Kurds.
Right.
Because there's not just a Kurd.
Right.
There's many sections, and there's Antifas involved in all that. But when Rome supposedly was falling, it was already not even Rome had already been split into different Western and Eastern empires, and the Western part really wasn't even ruled by Rome. It was still there. It was an image, but it was actually being administrated from a city called Ravenna. And then you got Constantinople, which had, I think it was named after Constantine, a couple hundred years before. It was already kind of siphoning, and there was a lot of more. It was more stable in the east. And when Rome kind of dissipated over a few years, Constantinople became the capital of the Byzantium Empire, and that thing lasted for 1,000 years.
Right.
But Constantinople now is Istanbul, and it's not the capital of Turkey, but it's the
Might as well.
it's the major. Ankara is the capital of Turkey, but Istanbul is where it's the gateway between Europe and Asia, and there's a lot of stuff happening over there right now.
Right.
It seems like we're always drawn back over that way. And then when we started talking about do all roads lead to Rome, we were just thinking about it. It's like maybe it's not Rome itself, and in some ways it is because of the Catholic Church and,
Right.
and all that history, but it's also just the type of people, these one world government people, and
Right, just
the
like
Isaac Asimovs.
The Isaac Asimov saying we need a federal world government. And the only question is how do we manage to get there? If you read all these scientists, these transhumanism, they all have one thing. They're all globalists.
Yeah, and that was Epstein, and I would bet you would find Mueller somewhere if you could see private conversations.
If he has
talking
any
about,
deep conversation, he seems
if
like
he
a
does,
moron.
yeah.
But one thing about this all roads leading to Rome is I'd like people to think about, when you think about times of old, like the days of Rome or further, the people that were in charge then, that were the corrupt people, and the descendants of those people. It's kind of like in Germany with the Nazis.
Yeah.
When you have people, like you are a product of your lineage and your ancestors that came before you. And unless you have this pivotal moment where you recognize, the sin, and you have logos, as Owen Benjamin's always talking about, where there's redemption, you just have that continual lineage of corruption. And so when you think about the days of Rome, Rome fell, but where did all of those corrupt
Those families, I mean, they
families end up?
they rebranded, basically, and
Right.
they kept going. And there was still Constantinople that was still going strong. It was still like a light for a long
Right.
time for a lot of
So
people.
think about the Bidens and Hunter Biden, and think about where their offspring will be
Yeah.
someday. These people don't just pop up out of nowhere. They didn't just wake up one day and they're corrupt. So when we say all roads lead to Rome, I mean, we mean it in a literal,
And metaphorical. I mean,
Yeah.
DC is a Rome for us too.
Yeah,
But then Rome is Rome. I mean, it's, Bar and
all right. Yeah, Barr and Durham are going back to
Then-
Italy to, this whole, Spygate thing. A lot of it came from Italy and Ukraine.
and a lot of all these nations were under the Roman Empire at the time,
Right.
including Great Britain.
Yeah.
So, and at the end of this is we've touched on in our investigations. We've looked at the Club of Rome. It's an academic club that was founded in 1968, and this thing consists of international heads of state, scientists, professors, all kinds of diplomats, military people, high-level people from all over the world who came together in 1968. And they put forth a study. They put their big public attention came in 1972, and this at the height of the Cold War. And they put out this report called The Limits to Growth. And it eerily similar to the climate change bullshit going on with, we have to control everything, the governments do, world government. They met in Switzerland. They put this report out. And I don't know these guys, Italian industrialist, Aurelio Pucci, Alexander King, a Scottish scientist. They formed this international group of people from all fields of academia, society, diplomacy. And they met at this place in Rome, hence the name Club of Rome.
Right.
So this report called The Limits to Growth, and they used I found this thing, where was it? Published in 72. They used computer simulations, and this is in 72, and computers, think about how backwards they were back then,
Yeah.
suggested that economic growth could not continue indefinitely because of resource depletion. Remember the oil,
Right. The oil.
peak oil and all that stuff. So, where is that sucker?
No, it was up. The part about MIT.
No, because I came back to this.
Oh.
Let's look at limits to growth. So limits to growth was this report that they put out in 72. So they use a computer simulation. And this thing's called World Freak, computer model. And it's a computer simulation of exponential economic and population growth with a finite supply of resources. First of all is how can any group of humans put together a computer model that will take into account billions of people's actions, everything, not just getting up, going to work, but everything,
Right.
economic, everything. And it was commissioned by this was also funded by the Volkswagen Foundation. We go back to
the
Nazi
People's
Germany.
Car.
It was presented at international gatherings in Moscow and Rio de Janeiro. And so Moscow in 1972 is an enemy of the U.S. But you've got Rio de Janeiro, and this is where we've got all the climate change stuff. Is everybody goes to Rio
Right.
all the time. And so these reports' authors, they were representing a team of 17 researchers, supposedly 30 million copies, 30 language, continues to generate debate, is what they say here. But one thing the purpose of this report, and here's a big thing, is this report was in commissioning the MIT team to undertake the project
MIT.
that resulted in Limits to Growth. So we've got MIT
We're
back in
sitting here talking about the
1972.
Club of Rome. Do all roads lead to Rome? And it comes back to the
And
MIT.
then we've got MIT again. So 2 key objectives of this report: gain insights into the limits of our world system and the constraints it puts on human numbers and activity. Gain insights into the world system. The myriad interactions between man and earth and animal,
Right.
and just gain
Well,
insights.
it reminds me, the people that want to control, like we have a capitalistic system. There's so many things and decisions being made in the capitalist system that when you try a socialist or a communist, there's a reason, but you can't account for all
You can't.
the tens of millions of
Oh, but they're
decisions that go
determined
into.
to. And then number two, the number two objective is identify and study the dominant elements and their interactions that influence the long-term behavior of world systems. And I would seem to me that they are, including humans,
Right.
the influence, and it's just, then we get into methodology, and I didn't get into that much,
Right.
but this World 3 computer model is a whole nother rabbit hole to go down to. But MIT was
MIT?
commissioned.
Well, as I was reading and preparing for this, I was reading about MIT Media Labs and how it was discovered. There's a Bush named Venera, or I can't. It begins with a V, and I don't think he's related to the Bushes, but he had a lot to do with the creation of MIT Media Labs in like 1913 or like early on, and like he was also helped. MIT Media Labs was used for like the biggest R&D, like research and development for our military, and this Bush dude was involved. He helped create Raytheon through the Defense Department. So it was interesting. I think the whole MIT Media Labs that's a whole rabbit hole in itself.
Yeah.
And the fact that Epstein was given all this money to MIT Media Labs and then Harvard, which Harvard, that's a whole nother thing because they've got that Martin Nowak who is a pedophile. Who, he was.
Here's the thing: is that there's a continuous thread,
Yeah,
and every
it's like
time
a
that there's
spider
another
web.
revelation of somebody,
It's like
of
a
some
spiral web.
bad character, how many times is it a pedophile or a porn distributor or something like that? But here are some conclusions that they got from this report. The what's it called again?
The World 3,
No, the
Club of
the
Rome.
growth. Limits to growth. This report. So after reviewing the computer models that they did in 1972, here's their conclusions. In business as usual, growth trends, the limits of growth on Earth will become evident by 2072. You notice how it's like with climate change. All the forecasts are out so far that most of the people hearing them and paying attention would be dead. So there'd be nobody to go, ha!
Right.
That didn't come true.
They can't predict next week, but
leading to sudden and uncontrollable decline in both population and industrial capacity. This includes the following, and this is great. So we're in 2019, right? Given business, global industrial output per capita reaches a peak around 2008, followed by a rapid decline. Somebody tell China that they're breaking the rules.
yeah.
Global food per capita reaches around 2020, followed by a rapid decline. Everything's followed by a rapid decline.
Right.
Global services per capita reaches a peak around 2020, followed by a rapid decline. And then global population reaches a peak in 2030, followed by a rapid decline. The growth trends existing in 72 could be altered so that sustainable ecological and economic stability could be achieved. Here we go, sustainable back in 72. The sooner the world's people start striving for the second outcome above, the better chance of achieving it. The sooner we strive for global food per capita reaching a peak.
Like they know
Yeah.
what that.
72 they said, in 2020, try to make any more food.
So that's next year, right?
And I'm sure with 20, there's two things in there with 2020, so that's gonna, somebody's gonna latch onto that and go, if we don't get rid of Trump, it's all gonna decline.
Right. Followed by rapid
over.
decline. So, all roads do lead to Rome, Rome,
some way or another.
Rome, when it, Rome was the epitome. Well, it was just a replay of what Moses, when he came down from off the mountain and he looked down there worshiping idols, and
Yeah.
it's just there's nothing new under the sun. And those people, Rome, the corrupt people, they didn't just go away with the fall. They spread and dispersed.
They did okay.
Yeah, and they're with us.
They were branded.
To this day.
They became somebody
and
else.
Interesting that you would call yourself Club of Rome.
Yeah. Because they met in Rome.
Right. So I think that's about all we have.
We're going to hit on some stuff on the next scope next month in November. It'll be the 13th.
Yeah, the 13th. The Ides will be on the 13th next month.
If you guys haven't heard of Rich Higgins,
oh yeah,
you need to start.
Yeah, we were
looking
thinking
him
about
up.
doing the scope on Rich Higgins, or maybe we'll just do a separate scope on Rich Higgins. We haven't decided, because Rich Higgins worked in. I think he was brought in by General Flynn. But he was in the Trump administration in the NSA, and after Flynn was fired, and he wrote that paper on the forces of the radical left and radical Islam and Antifa,
And media and everything.
all joining together. Basically.
He's got a book out. I'm actually in the middle of it.
He was right. McMaster got rid of, when he saw that, and it was written anonymously. I don't know how he found out who had written it, and he got rid of Rich Higgins. But we're going to go in depth on that. I think there's some good.
We needed more time.
Especially
There's so
now
much to
with
digest.
Antifa, everything that's happening with Antifa and radical Islam, Ilhan Omar, and all these forces. Everything that he wrote about has come true. He knew what he was talking about.
Well, and you might be able to Google Antifa and the Kurds or PKK, and just there's some stuff out there.
They were training together. He was spot on. I guess that's why McMaster got rid of him. But we are thinking about doing a video on that or doing our next scope on that. We haven't decided, so we will see. But we want to thank you for tuning in, and if you like what you saw, I hope that you'll share this. I want people to know about, we want to keep the spotlight on, even though Epstein's gone, that bigger pedophile ring is still out there, and I know a lot of people don't have hope.
We have to keep spotlight on that, but because they did those arrests, and then he died a month.
And then it's
I'll
just
just
died.
say he died a month later, and Barr said, this is very concerning how the circumstances
and the
of his death.
co-conspirators should not rest easy. Well,
but they are. They're resting easy so far.
And I know a lot of people don't think we'll ever see justice in this, but I'm praying for God's justice
It is up to
return.
God.
So
Vengeance is His. So
I'm going to give it to Him, but we'll just keep
we're going to
shining
do our
the
part
light
to
on
keep
it.
shining light on it.
Right.
We need to touch on Schwartz again sometime too, and follow up on him.
On who?
Schwartz up in New York that worked for.
Schwartz, Jacob Schwartz. Oh yeah, because I got to find out whether he's like.
Is he actually?
Is he in jail now?
Is he
or
actually
is
reporting for his
no.
sentence?
Need to find
did
somebody up there.
Something happened, and he'd get a sweetheart deal.
If you know anybody in Manhattan that can go and find out if Jacob Schwartz has shown up for his 3-year prison sentence.
And Jacob Schwartz worked for de Blasio in New York, and
yeah, no big deal.
Similar circumstances with him. It wasn't Robert Mueller this time, but it was the.
Well, it's Cyrus Vance. But
Cyrus
Cyrus Vance also was the one that went. Okay, so when Jeffrey Epstein got out,
yeah,
that was in Palm Beach, but he has an estate up in New York. So when he got out, someone from Cyrus Vance's, area lobbied to get him reduced to the lowest level sex offender
but
status.
I was going to say he had similarities to David Asimov with the amount of images that they found on his stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it was bad. It was raping infants.
Right. He was,
Infants.
And the thing about that is, why are they not going after who was on that video raping infants?
We don't find out anything. There's no follow up.
Yeah.
So okay, we got him on 3 years, and now we're done.
So we want to keep shining light on Epstein, even though he's gone. Because Ghislaine Maxwell, where is she? Where is Ghislaine Maxwell? Where is Les Wexner, who stepped down from Victoria's Secrets? Where is John Brockman, The
Yeah.
Edge?
And biggest of all, Ghislaine.
Yeah, so share this if you liked it, and come join us next month for the Ides.
November 13th. Thanks.